Good afternoon. Welcome to Grade 12 First Additional Language. Today's lesson is going to be divided into two parts. We're going to do poetry revision by looking at specific exam questions. In other words, how the questions are asked and exactly how you should answer those questions in order to receive full marks. Make sure that you have your poems as well as your notes in front of you that you can follow and make your own notes as I am explaining. Today we're going to work with the following poems: Sonnet 18, Still I Rise, and Death. But before we start, I just want to give great thanks and recognition to Mrs. P.J. Stolp for the compiling of the following PowerPoints that was used in some of the previous lessons. Those PowerPoints were Transactional Writing 1, Transactional Writing 2, Death, and Mid-Term Break. Thank you very much. Right, before we start with the questions of each poem, we are quickly going to look at a short summary of what this poem is about. Now, in Sonnet 18, the speaker begins by asking whether he should or will compare thee to a summer day. He says that his beloved is more lovely and more even-tempered. He then runs off a list of reasons why summer isn't all that great. Winds shake the buds that emerged in spring, summer ends too quickly, and the sun can get too hot or be obscured by clouds. He goes on saying that everything beautiful eventually fades by chance or by nature's inevitable changes. Coming back to the beloved, though he argues that his or her summer or happy beautiful years won't go away, nor will his or her beauty fade away. Moreover, death will never be able to take the beloved, since the beloved exists in internal lines, that means the poetry. The speaker concludes that as long as humans exist and can see, so as to read, the poem he's writing will live on, allowing the beloved to keep living as well. If we look at the first question that's in front of you, when we have two sonnets this year. Sonnet 18 and Spring, which we will do in the next lesson. Now, Sonnet 18 is an English or a Shakespearean sonnet. And with a poem like this, they can ask you the question, describe the structure of this poem fully, or they can ask you, comment critically on the structure of this poem. Now, you will see I have put down 5 bullets here. You only have to name 4, but you have to know all 5. I'll show you for the next question. So when you see a question about the structure of the poem, you immediately know you have to tell me which type of sonnet is it. Not a Shakespearean poem or an English or Elizabethan poem. It's a sonnet consisting of 14 lines. I am giving all the detail necessary. Then the next bullet, 3 quatrains consisting of 4 lines each, a rhyming couplet consisting of 2 lines, and then the rhyme scheme, very important, you have to write it out in full. And the last bullet, the poem is written in iambic pentameter. I said you have to know all 5 those bullets because you can get a question like this as well. The first question of your poem can either be comment critically on the structure, or they give you the words in a little block and you have to fill them in the correct places. Or they can even give it to you, fit column A with column B. In this case, they asked, complete the following sentences by filling in the missing words. They gave you the words there and you have to fill it in. Sonnet 18 is an Elizabethan. So you have to know Shakespearean, English, and Elizabethan is the same thing because they only give you the option here, Elizabethan. You can't write in there Shakespearean because that's what you study. You have to use the words that are given to you to fill in the open spaces. So that's why you have to know Sonnet 18 can either be named Elizabethan, English, or Shakespearean sonnet. It consists of 3 quatrains followed by a rhyming couplet. The poem is written in 14 lines in iambic pentameter. That is the last bullet of the previous question. So be sure you know all 5 of those bullets. You will see when we do the questions, I did it according to the line. So from the top to the bottom, the beginning of the poem to the end. Now refer to line 1, which says, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, with a question mark. And then identify and explain the figure of speech in this line. Take your highlighter, highlight the words identify, explain, and figure of speech. So this is what they're asking you, and then in this line only. So you only look at line 1. Now there are 3 options that you can answer. First of all, you can say it's a rhetorical question. Remember, that's a question that you do not expect an answer to. And then you have to explain. The poet is asking if he can compare his beloved to something that he sees as perfect, that is a summer's day. But he's not sure if the comparison will show his beloved's wonderful qualities. So in other words, what he is saying, can I compare you to something that is perfect, but actually you are better than that? Or it can be a metaphor. The poet's beloved is compared to a very pleasant long summer. So the 2 things that are being compared is the beloved with a perfect summer's day, because since it's the warmest season of the year, it has become the symbol of the most pleasant weather condition. It seemed to be the perfect season with no flaws. So a metaphor, you say 2 things that you compare with one another, and then you have to state what they have in common. So the first thing is, which 2 things are being compared? It's the beloved with a summer's day. And what do they have in common? Why are they being compared? Because they are both seen as perfect with no flaws. And then it can also be an apostrophe. Now remember, in literature, an apostrophe is a figure of speech in which a speaker directly addresses an absent or dead person, or an abstract quality, or something non-human, as if it were present and capable of responding. So it can either be an apostrophe because the poet addresses his beloved directly. That was line 1. We are referring now to line 3, which says, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Now identify and explain the figure of speech. Again, highlight identify, highlight explain, figure of speech, and line 3. You only look at that line. So the figure of speech, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Now immediately you can think a wind cannot shake something, so it's personification, and we all know personification is to give human characteristics to something that is not human. So the wind is portrayed as having human qualities. It is violent towards the delicate buds. It is shaking it. It is the wind that is blowing. Or it can be antithesis. So the rough winds is described as being destructive, and the darling buds vulnerable. So the destructiveness of the winds is contrasted to the vulnerability of the flower buds. Refer to lines 5 to 6. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. Using your own words, explain these lines. Now in this question, own words, very important. People, if you are not asked to quote in a literature question, you have to, as far as possible, use your own words. Otherwise, you will be penalized for that. So we are only going to look at lines 5 to 6, and we have to explain these lines in our own words. So we are, as far as possible, not going to use words directly from the poem. So sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines. Take that first part. So then you say sometimes the sun, because that's the eye of heaven, is too hot. And then and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And other times it is hidden perhaps by the clouds, the word dimmed. But then there is gold complexion that we have to explain as well. So he calls the sun eye of heaven and gives it a complexion which generally refers to the skin of the face. Look at all the detail in my answer. I am explaining everything in those 2 lines for the 2 marks that will be given to you. Lines 7 to 8, and they love these 2 lines to ask a question on this. In almost every paper that I went through, they ask about lines 7 to 8, so you can mark this as very important. The 2 lines says, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. Again, explain these lines in your own words. You can say highlight lines 7 to 8 and highlight the words own words. What does it mean? So, and every fair from fair sometime declines. Now, we all know the word fair means beauty. So, at one time or another, the beauty of all beautiful things declines, degenerates. Nothing lasts forever. And then the second part, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. This degeneration takes place either by chance, accident, or as a result of nature's natural cycle, nature's changing course untrimmed. Right, so we've explained everything in those 2 lines. Just a short question that they asked about line 7. Fair from fair is an example. Look at the alliteration of the F. Repetition of the consonant F. Refer to line 9. But thy eternal summer shall not fade. Explain in your own words, highlight own words, which 2 things, highlight that, of his beloved will not fade. So we only look at line 9, thy eternal summer shall not fade. Which 2 things is he talking about? Remember, it may seem in this poem that he's constantly only talking about his beloved's beauty, but he's not. He's also talking about her characteristics. So the answer there will be his beloved's characteristics or his beloved and his beloved's beauty. Those are the 2 things for 2 marks. Then refer to line 9 to line 12. Right? Line 9, but thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. Quote and explain the example of hyperbole evident in these lines. So you highlight the word quote and explain and hyperbole. So we remember that hyperbole is the extreme exaggeration or over-exaggeration to make a point or to show emphasis. Right, so the quote they wanted was, but thy eternal summer shall not fade. Eternal summer shall not fade. And then you have to explain it. His beloved's beauty and honor will never end. His beloved will become immortal. So you had to quote the hyperbole and then explain that it means that her beauty and her wonderful characteristics or honor will never end. Refer to line 11. Now line 11 says, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. Explain the use of the personification in line 11. Remember, personification to give human characteristics to something that is not human, in this case, death. Now, the line says, nor shall death brag thou wanderest. So death is personified as a person who brags about his power, meaning the power to kill. The second part is so very important because in this line it says death will not be able to brag. that it has conquered his beloved. So if you're only going to say death is personified as a person who is able to brag, yes, you'll get 1 mark for death is being personified. But the second part is very important. Look at the second option that I gave you. Death will not be able to brag about its power because it will be powerless. Coming near to death is compared to someone who walks in the shadow of someone else. So that part about death will not be able to brag is very important. That is the essence of your answer. We are still with line 11. Explain the use of the metaphor. Right, in line 11. So now shade is a metaphor for the time of one's death. Listen to the line again. Nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade. So that shade is a metaphor for the time of one's death. So to be close to death, walk in the valley of death, is compared to someone walking close to another person by walking in his shadow. Then still in line 11, quote 1 word that signifies a shift or a change of thought in this poem, and it's obviously the first word in line 9, and that is but. That question is about line 9, right? Then what they love to ask, and they can use a different number here in your own word, discuss 2 or 3 or 4 shortcomings of summer. And then you have to say it in your own words. You have to say summer is too short. If you say, like in line 4, and summer's lease hath all too short a date, you're not going to get the mark. So you have to say the sun is too hot during summer. You can't say sometime too hot, the eye of heaven shines in line 5. Often the sun is obscured by clouds. Own words again. All beauty in nature fades and nature continually changes during summer. Please, these 5 bullets are very important. Remember your own words. So you highlight own words and shortcomings and the number 2. If they ask for 2, you can write 2 down, please. To be sure, you can write more than 2, but usually if there is a number in your question, they mark the first 2 things that you write down. So if you write down 2 bullets, they mark those 2. If you wrote down 3 and they asked only 2, and the first one is correct, the second one is incorrect, the third one is correct, you won't get any marks for the third one because we mark the first 2. Refer to the poem as a whole. Then you have to look at the whole poem, quote 1 word. Now this is very important. If they ask you to quote 1 word, make very sure that you quote only 1 word. If you're going to write down 2 words with no inverted commas, you're not going to get the mark because they mark the very first word that you write down. Say, for instance, you write the word to, then it will be incorrect. If you write down more than 1 word, be sure the word that you want me to mark is in inverted commas and underlined. But the safest way is when you are asked to write down only 1 word. Write down only 1 word because the first word will be marked unless you put the correct word in inverted commas or you underlined it. The next question, how will the speaker ensure that his beloved's beauty will be preserved forever? Read this question again. How will the speaker ensure? So this is about the speaker, not the reader. It's not about the person reading the poem. It's about the speaker. So what will he do to ensure that his beloved's beauty will be preserved forever? The speaker will write about his beloved's beauty in his poetry. Be very sure that you read your questions and understand them. This is about the speaker, not about the reader reading the poem, thus ensuring that the poem or the memory will go on forever. This is about the speaker, and this was marked in this specific way. If the candidate did not say the speaker will write in his poetry, he did not get the mark. If the candidate said the reader or as long as this poem is read, no, that was about the reader. So make very sure, highlight the word speaker. Then identify the speaker's tone in this poem. As I said in some of the previous lessons, remember, tone is about what you hear. So how is he saying this? He is saying it with adoration, devotion, and affection. Right, name one main theme that is evident in this poem. In this question, you only have to name it. Usually with a theme, they can either tell you, name and explain or describe whatever the theme, then it's obviously for more marks, or they will give you. They will say, love is one of the main themes that is evident in this poem, discuss. In this case, you only had to name the theme, which can be love, literature, time, or man and the natural world. Refer to line 14, which is the last line. So long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Do you think Shakespeare has succeeded in his goal of immortalizing his patron's beauty? Give 2 reasons for your answer. So you can either say yes or no. You may give a combination answer of yes and no. Make just very sure that your yes motivation fits with yes and the other way around. So if you said yes, Shakespeare has succeeded in his goal of immortalizing his patron's beauty. Immortalizing his patron's beauty is meaning it is to make it go on forever. Everyone will remember it forever. Shakespeare's work has been read for 500 years and will still be read in the future. He made sure of that by writing about her beauty in his poetry. That means that the memory of his beloved or his loved one will live on. She will remain in the minds of those who read about her. Now, look at what I said here. I made my point. Shakespeare's work has been read for 500 years and will still be read in the future. And now I explained it, and then I'm giving an example. He made sure of that by writing about her beauty in his poetry. So I used an example from the text, and that would be in line 12, when in eternal lines, those eternal lines is the poetry. And then I go on and I say, that means that the memory of his loved one will live on. She will remain in the minds of those who read about her. So as long as people are reading this poem, they will be reminded of her beauty. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Right, that's my yes answer. My no answer, she died long ago. It's only her memory that lives on. She is not immortal. You see, there's a lot more information at the yes option. Using your own words, again, very important. Explain the last 2 lines of the poem. What I just said, so long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So in the couplet, the poet refers to the victory over death. So even though the poet and his lover must die, they will remain alive in the hearts of those who read the poem. So as long as people are alive and they are reading this poem, they will be reminded of his beloved's beauty. Thus, her beauty will live forever. Do you agree with the speaker's claim that his beloved is more beautiful than summer? Again, here, make a point. explain it, give an example, and then link back to your question. So if you said yes, remember you are allowed to give a combination answer of yes and no. Make sure the motivation fit with your yes or no. So if you said yes, the speaker claims his beloved is not moody or temperamental like the season of summer. There's an example from the poem. She's not harsh like the wind that could be destructive in damaging the buds. The beloved's beauty does not change, unlike the sun, which is either too scorching or at times hidden by the clouds. Summer is a short period of time. His beloved's beauty, however, is eternal, and not even death can affect it, as it will be immortalized in the poem. The yes part is a perfect answer with point making, example given, and linked back to the question. If you decided to say no, his beloved's beauty cannot be compared to a perfect summer's day. Summer is regarded by many as being a beautiful season. However, the speaker's perception of his beloved's beauty is personalized and not shared by everybody. Just as summer has imperfections, the strong winds, the hot sun, so too does the speaker's beloved have a bad temper and mood swings. Everything is subject to the passage of time. Right, we move over to Still I Rise. Now, the short summary, Still I Rise by Maya Angelou, is an inspiring and moving poem that celebrates self-love and self-acceptance. The poem takes the reader through a series of statements the speaker makes about herself. She praises her strength, her body, and her ability to rise up and away from her personal and historical past. There is nothing, the speaker declares, that can hold her back. She is going to rise above and beyond anything that seeks to control her. Now, again, like in the previous poem that we did, your first question can either be where they give you a list of words to fill in, or it can be fit column A with column B. Now, these are two examples that they used where they provided you a list with words and you had to put it in the correct spaces. Still I Rise is a lyric poem. The speaker is an African-American woman who writes a poem about fighting back against racial prejudice and the leftovers of slavery that Black African Americans have endured for many years. The next one, this is a lyric poem where the speaker is telling the audience of oppressors how she overcame racism with determination to rise above her past. Right. Now, explain the use of the harsh adjectives in line 2. Remember, an adjective describes the verb. If we read line 2, with your bitter, twisted lies. Now, bitter and twisted is the adjectives. They are described as harsh because the poet is very emotional about the way the ruling white classes or the white people misrepresented Black people in their history books. Remember, the history books was written from one point of view. They did not represent the truth of how things really happened, and that is why the poet is so emotional about the way it was misrepresented in the history books. Refer to line 3. You may trod me in the very dirt. Explain the figurative meaning of this line. So here you highlight the words figurative meaning. Now, you may trod me in the very dirt. To tread someone in the dirt means that you treat that person with enormous disrespect. So this implies that white people viewed Black people as less than human, so they crushed and belittled them as they figuratively stepped on them. Now, if we look at the first line, you may write me down in history. Who is the second person pronoun you referring to? You refers to the oppressors, anyone that has ever been guilty of oppressing anybody. That is the you. Now, identify the figure of speech in line 4, but still, like dust, I'll rise. The word like tells us it's a simile, and then the second part of the question, explain how the poet uses this comparison, he's talking about the simile, to help the reader understand the urge to rise. So the poet is adamant not to be pushed into dirt or gutters any longer. They will challenge their oppressors and they will raise their head. Look at the image of dust. Remember, if the wind is blowing outside and it rises up the dust, there is no way that you can contain that or push it down again. So that's the image. She will not be pushed into dirt or gutters any longer. She will rise above anything that comes her way. Identify the speaker's tone in stanza 2. Now in stanza 2 she says, does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. The tone is about what you hear. So you can put sassy, energetic, playful, confident or self-assured. And then what characteristics of the poet are revealed in stanza 2? She's confident or she has a very strong personality. Then refer to line 7. 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells. Name the figure of speech used in this line. Now it can either be a metaphor or a simile. If you were asked to name and explain the figure of speech and you chose to say metaphor, the explanation is her success is compared to an oil well that spouts out from the earth. It cannot be stopped. Neither the oil well that spouts out or her success that is growing can be stopped. The simile, of course, is in spite of her poverty. She acts as if she is rich and already successful. The word oil is a symbol of, and the first thing you will think of, it is wealth. But go back, people, every time you see a question, go back to the line of the poem and read it in the context of this poem. Then you will see the word oil is a symbol of her success as a writer and a woman. So very important with each question. Go back to the poem, read the line again, read the line just above it and just below it so that you can see the exact context that those words are used in. Refer to stanza 3. Now stanza 3 says, just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Again, identify the tone used in this stanza. Tone is about what you hear. It will either be confidence or determination. How suitable is the simile in this stanza? Now the simile is just like moons and like suns. So she compares herself to the sun and the moon. She raises herself emotionally to stay strong, just as the sun and the moon rise every day, no matter what. So she will rise every day, no matter what, just like the sun and the moon rise every day, no matter what. Line 9 and line 10. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides. Now explain the symbolism of moons, suns, and tides. Symbolism highlight, moon, suns, and tides highlight. The suns is symbolic of hope, the moon of love, and tides of time. Therefore, time, hope, and love inspire her to rise from the atrocities and inflexible circumstances of life. Or the speaker refers to natural forces or elements that are eternal and cannot be contained or controlled. Likewise, she is certain that she will not give up and cannot be controlled. Or moon and stars can also refer to achieving success or ambition. Thus, the speaker will not give up but work towards achieving her goals. We are still with line 9 and 10. State why the speaker makes reference to moons, suns, and tides. The speaker refers to natural forces, elements that are eternal and cannot be contained or controlled. Likewise, she is certain that she will not give up and cannot be controlled. Similar answer to the previous question. Or moon and stars can also refer to achieving success or ambition. Thus, the speaker will not give up but work towards achieving her goals. Then, what does Angela want to stress with the use of the natural resource image like oil wells in line 7, gold in line 19, and diamonds in line 27? All these natural resources are listed in an order where each one's value is higher than the one mentioned before it. What they all have in common is that they are hidden beneath the earth, hidden from sight, and they have to be mined in order to be discovered. The same is true for a black woman. A woman's natural resources are qualities that are not obvious. They are hidden in private spaces or easier, just as people must dig to discover the richness of the earth, which is the oil, the gold, and the diamonds. So we have to put in an effort to discover the richness of our fellow human beings, whatever the race or the sex or the nationality might be. Explain in your own words a very similar question, how the imagery of oil wells, gold, and diamonds contribute to the message of the poem. Remember, the message of this poem is she is going to rise above and beyond anything that seeks to control her. So the answer, these natural resources are all hidden beneath the earth and have to be mined to be discovered. In the same way, the richness in a person's personality is something that is hidden and needs to be mined. Just as people must dig to discover the richness of the earth, the oil, the gold, and the diamonds, so we have to put in an effort to discover the richness of our fellow human beings, whatever the sex or race or nationality. I love to ask the question on these three entities. Then explain the figurative meaning of line 22, which says, you may cut me with your eyes. If we just look at the line just before and just after it, line 21, you may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness. Now the question says, explain the figurative meaning of you may cut me with your eyes. So when you hurt someone by looking scornfully or contemptuously at that person, you look at him with hatred. Then we all know how important the themes are. Discuss how the theme of perseverance or survival is evident in this poem. So now the speaker portrays the history of racism and brutality to her race and the determination to overcome this wretched treatment. So she's going to survive with determination. The poem depicts the American treatment of African Americans despite slavery and prejudice. The speaker says or promises that none of that will stop African Americans in their quest for equality, contentment, and success. The phrase, "Still I rise," is repeated several times. It reflects the idea that no matter what comes your way, she or all African Americans will stand up and try again. Throughout the poem, the speaker makes the point that nothing that the oppressors have done to African Americans all these years will stop them from overcoming their obstacles and succeeding. This is resonated in like dust or like air, I'll rise. And the poem reflects the universal idea that no matter what comes your way, the determination to rise is evident. Okay, so that is survival or perseverance. Then another theme, determination. The message that the poem wants to bring home to the reader is her strength to strike back against the discrimination of races and gender. This offers hope and courage for those or others who suffer from the same ordeal. Then, would you consider using this poem as part of a South African campaign against abuse against women and children? Now, you must remember, this was not written from the point of view of a South African. This woman is an African American, and it's about oppression in America, slavery in America. But now the question asks, would you consider using this poem as part of a South African campaign against abuse against women and children? So if you said yes, she's an African American woman who is subjected to slavery, discrimination, oppression, and wants to empower other women to break free from this bondage. Despite her suffering, she has risen above her circumstances. So in this point, he is comparing her circumstances with a woman in South Africa suffering from abuse, and it is to show that despite her suffering, she has risen above her circumstances. Then the next bullet, she portrays resolution and determination, thus becoming the hope for many other African Americans and women alike, even in South Africa. So the fact that she as a woman with determination rose above her circumstances, she can become the hope of any woman anywhere in the world. And then the next bullet, poetry is universal and can reach a wide audience. And then despite her circumstances, she has achieved success and can serve as an empowering example for other women. Remember, you are allowed to say yes and no. You're allowed to give that combination answer as long as your motivation fits with the correct yes or no answer. If you decide to say no, this poem can't be considered as part of a South African campaign against abuse against women and children, then you can motivate. The speaker writes from her experience as an African American slave. This is not relevant to South Africa's apartheid legacy or whatever is happening in South Africa. She focuses on her personal experience of slavery as an African American woman, not on domestic violence. Not everyone reads poetry, which means this will not reach a wide audience. Poetry is furthermore open to interpretation, so not everyone will interpret the poem the same and receive the same message, and not everyone is aware of Maya's background, thus they may not consider her as an example of an emancipated, empowering woman, feminist or female figure. Right, that concludes Still I Rise. Then we move over to the poem Death. First of all, a short summary again. The speaker describes how one night he cannot fall asleep because he lies thinking about death or dying. He tries all means possible to avoid thinking about death, but he fails. Death seems to outwit him every time. It seems to know what his next move will be. Eventually, he admits that there is no way to escape death. You will have to accept it. Again, your first question, they give you words in a list and you have to choose and fill it in the correct space. So the poem is written in the form of a ballad, and the structure consists of 5 quatrains with rhyming couplets. A first-person speaker is used to make the poem more personal. Line 1 to 2. One night as I lay on my bed and sleep on fleeting foot had fled. Identify and explain first of all the figure of speech in these lines. Look at sleep that has fled. So sleep is described as a person who runs away. So obviously your figure of speech is personification, where we give human characters to something non-human, which is sleep. So sleep is described as a person who runs away from the speaker. So sleep seems to elude him, like a person who is quickly running away on foot. His fear of death has rendered him unable to sleep. He is desperately and in vain trying to sleep. The same two lines identify and explain the sound device. Now, in the first question, you highlighted figure of speech. Here you highlight sound device. Now, people, let's just quickly talk about sound devices that are applicable to you in grade 12. First of all, we know assonance, a repetition of a vowel. Then we have alliteration, the repetition of a consonant. And then we have onomatopoeia, words that imitate sounds. So those three are important for you in grade 12 to remember as sound devices: assonance, alliteration, and onomatopoeia. Right, so identify the sound device. It is alliteration because it's a repetition of the F sound and we're explaining it. That repetition emphasizes sleep's quick disappearance. Remember, if something in poetry is repeated, it's always to emphasize, and you have to explain what is being emphasized. And in this case, it emphasizes sleep's quick disappearance or running away or the evading of the speaker. Using your own words, state why the speaker's mind was heavy in line 3. He says, because no doubt my mind was heavy. So with the words because no doubt tells us he's quite sure why he cannot sleep. So he says, my mind was heavy. So the speaker is worried about dying. He thinks about death constantly. Then to line 4, with concern for my last journey. To what does the words last journey? Last journey refers to death is described as the final journey of man's life. Then give 2 possible meanings of the word dim as used in line 7. Line 7 says, but before I wet my eyes so dim. So it can either, the word dim can either refer to the speaker is very tired, he is close to death, his eyes are blurred by tears because of his sadness, or he tries to keep awake to avoid death. Then, quote 5 consecutive words from the poem which suggest that the speaker is kneeling to pray. Now, first of all, consecutive. Remember, consecutive means the words following each other continuously. So 5 words, and I said, if you only have to quote 5, only quote 5. Don't quote more or less. 5 for a reason, and that we see in stanza 3, where I went to church that I might pray, thinking sure he'd keep away. But before I got onto my feet, there sat death upon my seat. So the 5 words which suggest that the speaker is kneeling to pray is got onto my feet. Then, why is the speaker sure that death will not enter a church in line 9 and 10? I went to church that I might pray, thinking sure he'd keep away. Now, the speaker thinks that a church is supposed to be a place of safety, a sanctuary, and it is there where the speaker thinks he will be protected against death. But remember, this poem is actually about him not being able to stop to think about death. So no matter where he's going to go, he is going to think about death. You cannot escape your own thoughts. Explain the irony of the speaker's action in stanza 4. Now stanza 4 says, "To my chamber then I hide, thinking sure he'd keep outside. But though I firmly locked the door, death came from underneath the floor." So the irony there is, remember when you see the word irony, remember you have to show me two parts of the question. Both parts should be included in order for you to earn 2 marks. You can't get a split mark. It's either 2 or 0. So the speaker locks the door to hide in his bedroom, but death enters from under the floor. So despite the speaker securely locking his doors, he's unable to keep death away. Death enters from under the floor. Both parts should be included to earn 2 marks. Then, why is death personified throughout the poem? Death appears to follow the speaker everywhere, and the subject of death is always on the speaker's mind. So because the speaker is always thinking about death, it is like a person following, almost stalking him all the time. Refer to line 20, the last line. Death was captain of the ship. Explain the figurative meaning, highlight figurative meaning. So then your answer will be, it is death who will decide when it is time for the speaker to die. The speaker has no say in the matter. The captain, remember, the captain is in control of the ship. He makes the decisions. So by calling death the captain, it shows us that death will decide when it's time for the speaker to die. The speaker has no say in the matter. Then would you classify the tone of this poem as humorous or solemn? So funny or serious? Discuss your view. Again, you can give two answers. You can give a combination answer. You can say it is humorous and solemn, but make sure your motivation for humorous fit with that, and the same way around with solemn. So if you said humorous, you can say death is personified and seems to follow the speaker everywhere, like a stalker. When the speaker wants to wash his face, death is sitting on the edge or the rim of the washing bowl. Remember, I make a point, I explain it, I give an example. The places the speaker chooses to hide from death makes it humorous. He goes to church, but death is sitting in his seat. The speaker seems to play hide and seek with death, but death finds him every time. If you chose solemn, the speaker appears to be close to death. He might fear death because of the uncertainty that awaits him. Remember, anything for a human being that is unknown scares him. That is why he's afraid of death. It is natural to avoid death for as long as possible and try to find ways to escape death, especially if you are afraid of death, like the speaker appears to be. And death is a serious matter, as it is the final goodbye to your loved ones. Right, that concludes our lesson for today. I sincerely hope you found all of this useful. Tomorrow we will continue with 3 more poems discussing the exam questions. Have a wonderful afternoon. Make wise choices. Goodbye.